with me. And first of all, I want to thank Chad, Oliver, Paulina also for organising this event. And the attraction of the event, I think, is proven by the fact that for no other conference would I have been here at this time of year. So definitely the lure is strong. All right. So, the question of the links between beats and European Romanticism remains a vexed and complex one. The beats' willfully impure aesthetics and the hybridity of their sources nearly almost went together with striking adaptations of their models to contemporary American reality and language, inspirational templates being as much used for emulation as for experimental transgression, inevitably complicates comparative work and the tracing of possible influences versus mere confluences between texts. In the case of influence, another complication is to establish whether it is direct, this is to say inherited straight down the line from the British model, or indirect, this is to say harking back to a British model, but picked up and transformed on the way via American transcendentalism, or even sometimes French Romanticism. And further complication lies in how to maintain the balance between convergence and divergence, how to address similarities between beat and romantic voices without passing under silence some of the huge divergences between them too. And to make the life of the common-lit critic even more nightmarish, it often proves difficult to assess to what extent exactly key beat figures were exposed to seminal texts of the English Romantic canon. For instance, whilst Blake endured as a central influence on Ginsberg over half a century, specific references to actual Blake texts in his journals remain surprisingly few in view of the fundamental bond between the two poets. Lastly, just as in their own day, the beats represented anything but a monolithic sensibility and avant-garde, the same applies to the Romantics and their emphasis on individual subjectivity too. When talking about English Romanticism and beats, which version of Romanticism are we talking about? The label of Romanticism proving sometimes as flexible as the term beat itself. So, assuming that the complete scholar has not yet committed suicide by now, how does reading certain beat writings through the prism of British Romanticism allow us to look at them with a fresh gaze? And conversely, how do beat preservations and transformations of the Romantic legacy also help us to better understand some of the latter specificities with hindsight? Now, obviously, I'm not going to exhaust this question, this double question, but I'll just sort of give it a go in one respect today. So today I can only cover a very short section of that two-way road between English Romanticism and the beats. Many figures will be left stranded along the highway, and the two main passengers in the complete automobile for today will be Ginsberg and Keats, with Siesta and Chivalva and the great odes in the respective backpack of each. This might be a slightly surprising choice for those who know me well and who are probably more used to my classes and research focusing on Blake and Ginsberg. And it might also feel like a surprising choice to those who do not know me, since correlating the chiselled, compact artistry of Keats with the raw and rougher expansiveness of beat writing might seem quite a baffling proposition at first. So how does the geographical and mental labyrinth of Siesta and Chivalva reveal itself to be a Keatsian labyrinth? How does Ginsberg's in limbo state in the Mexican jungle continue and renew the romantic sublime? Well, before engaging the question of how Siesta and Chivalva borrows and renews the universe of Keats's odes, a quick word here about why the Keats and Ginsberg tandem might actually not be such an eccentric proposition after all. We need to remember that. We need to remember that some fleeting allusions in Ginsberg's and Kerouac's letters suggest but both were familiar with his work, and that some sentences in Keats's poetry remained part of their memory stock. Besides including Keats in some of the readings featuring in his journals, Ginsberg also sporadically discusses him, as in a passage of his 1954 diaries, in which he elaborates upon the ellipsis and the haiku technique. Interestingly enough, quoting both a stanza from the Belle Dame sans Merci and referring to a particular line of Ode to a Nightingale, Ginsberg sees them as exemplative of actually attaining an inner secret time shot, the result of telescoping time by setting up two or more image points separated with such a wide gap showing distance between them, the jump or interval or ellipsis of consciousness, a sort of mystical eclipse of time arrived at through the science of presenting clearly images showing change, key to a poetry with a more holy inner structure. After which, Ginsberg himself makes a huge jump in time and style, immediately turning to Cézanne and alluding to the French painter's haiku-like technique on canvas and the petite sensation they thereby produced. So actually the sort of Keats-Cézanne connection is quite interesting, and to bring Cézanne and Keats together, Cézanne being Ginsberg's favourite painter, that cannot just be irrelevant. So Keats was not absent from Ginsberg's thoughts in the period in which he was still searching for his mature voice and reflecting on the way his poetry should deal with image and symbol, a formative period that precisely includes the production of Siesta and Chivalva in 1954. Yet this is a fact that commentators rarely bear in mind when discussing this poem and the body of work that surrounds it. Besides remembering that the ghost of Keats does make sporadic appearances in Ginsberg's private prose, we also need to remember what the narrative poetic voice is actually doing in Keats's odes. And here I merge views developed by several Keatsian scholars like Robert Gittins, Sarah Smith, and Leon Waldorf. All the major odes, so Psyche, Indolence, Melancholy, Nightingale, the Grecian Urn, look at the same problem but from different angles, oscillating from pure nature, as in the Nightingale, to pure art, as in the Grecian Urn. The problem being essentially that of imagination versus mortality. More specifically, the odes balance a craving for transcendence against a recognition of the inevitability of progression and change, a recognition leading to an affirmation of natural processes, such as into autumn, in which we hear faint echoes of revolt against the human condition. This tension between the yearning for transcendence and the acceptance of transience helps explain the melancholy that pervades the odes, along a spectrum ranging from the implicitly subdued to the explicitly acute. This tension also helps explain the intensity of the perceptions described by Keats. The odes thus typify the central Keatsian conflict, in which imagination gets pitted against a sense of real things, the world of empirical, everyday existence. Also, each of the odes revolves around symbols associated with immortality, or having immortality attributed to it, even when this immortality seems injected. Immortality delivered versus potential immortality failing to deliver is thus a central question at the heart of Keats' odes. So many experiments testing the power of the imagination versus nature and what it relates to the senses. So many experiments delving into how the imagination can cope with different forms of loss characterizing the human condition, including the inevitable extinction of the registering consciousness of the poet. We have the impression in the odes that nature wins and the imagination itself cannot escape the mutability and recyclings inherent in the cycles of nature. So in a way, for Keats, thought and imagining, including the imagination leading to artistic production, themselves become forms of nature. More generally too, each ode expresses a longing for a restoration in union with a subliminal presence that seems to haunt the ode, a longing felt by a poetic voice that feels in limbo between past and present, past and future. As a result, a strange tension pervades Keats's odes, the impression of mutability, putting an end to an intense experience, vying with a sense of a kind of eternal present. Whether perishable or eternal, the intensity of the moment is partly created by a poetic voice trying to establish relations with what surrounds it in actuality. So the voice trying to establish relations with what surrounds it in actuality or in imagination, that is also a central aspect of Keats's work. And interestingly enough, all the processes and tensions described here can also be said to apply to Siesta and Chivalva, an extended poetic sequence in two parts, in which indeed the labyrinth of thought superimposes itself on the labyrinth of nature, with the meanderings of nature and culture interpenetrating, with all the tropes of the romantic sublime also in the longer first section of the poem. Literally suspended in his hammock and surveying his surroundings with a mildly hallucinated gaze, the poet is also metaphorically suspended in between dimensions in his never quite materializing attempt to cross the threshold of dualistic perception. So, for those who don't actually know the poem too well, basically in 1954, Ginsberg writes his poem recording his journeys to Mexico, and he goes actually to pre-Columbian ruins, and he explores the territory, the pre-Columbian ruins of Mexico, quite in depth. But also, this is a period of solitude, of musing, of trying to find his poetic voice, and actually the poem shows him mildly hallucinated, trying to let the mind fall down, that's the expression he uses, and actually registering in great detail everything that is around him, not necessarily in a very sort of ordered, logical way. It's a kaleidoscopic gaze, and the kaleidoscopic gaze outside means a kaleidoscopic gaze inside. There's also sort of kaleidoscopic mental ecology. So whilst constantly on the verge of a perceptual breakthrough towards this non-dualist mind, non-dualist perception, Ginsberg's focus alternates between past and present, between inner and outer, between the labyrinthine forms of the physical nature around him and the labyrinthine forms taken by his own thoughts. This corresponds between inner and outer dimensions is not only the one cherished by the Romantics in general, but it is also enacting on the page Coleridge's vision of the mind functioning as a kind of Aeolian harp. So the Aeolian harp is flat, stringed instrument upon which the wind naturally brushes and that actually emits natural, spontaneous, unpredictable sounds. That's the way in which actually Coleridge saw the human mind and the human imagination functioning. The outside stimuli brushing against the pores of the mind, which in turn actually starts to imagine and starts to reprocess these outer stimuli. So I leave you with the extract from the Aeolian harp there. However, the romantic traces in the poem are far more hybrid. Not only does Ginsberg's mind function like a 20th century Aeolian harp, suspended in the midst of the mysterious and maze-like Mexican jungle, the poem also comes complete with ruins, vastness, infinity, obscurity, death, thresholds of space and consciousness, elusively intuitive but never crossed. This is to say, all these ingredients that Edmund deemed so essential to the sublime, and its accompanying terror, suspension of rationality, and sense of absence generating intensity of unease. Quite importantly, thus, as is often the case with the Romantics, in Chivalva, landscape becomes a state of mind. However, the problematic, and here we go. So, however, Burkean sublimity aside, usually in both my teachings and research, my preferred road of entry into the poem has been a two-lane one combining Blake and Whitman, and I certainly do not deny their presence in Siesta. On the one hand, both parts show the all-inclusive gaze of Whitman. On the other, both parts of the poem do bear traces of the Blakean yearning for a cleansing of the doors of perception. The first part exudes this longing for a Blakean move from experience to higher innocence in its attempt to reach an epiphany based on the deciphering of the correspondence between the particular in the here and now and its eternal form beyond the mere material. Unsurprisingly, the first section too closes on a reminder of Ginsberg's mystical awakening whilst reading Blake back in 1948, whereas the closing of the second part, which you have on screen, tries to achieve this cleansing of perception, not so much through a bridging of the ephemeral with the eternal, as through a revolution of consciousness based on the revolutionary style, Ginsberg adopting fluid verse more in line with Kerouac's essential spontaneous prose, and already anticipating the road poetry that he would himself later develop in the form of America. And as Alicia's tribally points out, the ghost of Blake seems to hover over the end of the composition, with Ginsberg vowing to be a visionary poet, re-entering a US territory very reminiscent of a Eurasianic landscape, complete with docks and mills. So, when it comes to romantic influences, the Blakean and Whitmanian overtones are certainly not in doubt. However, Part 1, the longest section of the composition, also draws its mesmerizing, uncanny feel through another process, and the one of trying to establish Blake-like correspondences between the grain of sand and infinity. On the one hand, Ginsberg, we see, is a Ginsberg insisting as an observer on deciphering the hieroglyphics of eternity through the remains of pre-Columbian art. And this strongly puts the reader in mind of Keats's Ode on the Grecian urn, and some of the questions implicit in this older poetic observer trying to engage an artifact of a bygone civilization. On the other hand, if Ode on a Grecian urn and the cold pastoral to which the urn gets assimilated, so cold pastoral is an important Keatsian concept here. So this cold pastoral leaped to mind first whilst reading Ginsberg's engagement with the double cold pastoral of stony ruins and of a landscape that resists interpretation. Successive rereadings of the poem also waken echoes of the other odes that Keats wrote in the same year, 1819, and which commentators believe to be inseparable, complementary companion pieces to the Grecian ode. So just as in this poem, Keats contemplates the different facets of an imaginary urn, an imaginary object that is actually a composite of different varieties from antiquity, Ginsberg here also seems to have produced a composite echoing and mirroring different facets of Keats's odes. Now, the next section is actually the section in which we have Ginsberg trying to decipher the entablatures, portals of stone and their secret. And I'll leave that on screen for a minute before I actually put on screen sections of the Grecian urn. So, like Keats, Ginsberg is here faced with, to borrow his own terms, hieroglyphs of eternity, which he interrogates, but whose resisting silence questions the roles of the artist and the endurance of the artistic artifact as the only form of mortality. Like Keats, Ginsberg surveys what an artist of a previous time produced, tries to pierce through the secret of a language whose traces have not entirely been lost across the ages, but whose meaning is no longer clear as they once would have been to the artist's contemporary. And perhaps we can for a minute have the Keatsian section. So we have here actually the first stanza of the Grecian urn, in which, Keats not only, adores and contemplates the urn, but also addresses questions that don't actually get any answer in the poem. So in a minute we'll go back to the Ginsberg. So, one might say that for Keats too, in a way, the scenes of ritual and love wreathed around the urn and that he's depicting are silent hieroglyphs of eternity, which he repeatedly tries to decipher, but cannot quite interpret for sure. In both poems, something lives on, but what? And is it certain that the contemporary viewer reads the signs in the same way as past observers? So perhaps we can go back to the Ginsberg one, thanks. So it also links Keats's urn to Ginsberg's pre-Columbian portal and its strange entablatures is the survival of the artifact versus the complete evanescence of the maker. The artifact has more identity than its creator, which brings mixed blessings to the observer. Art, its mystery, its indecipherability may endure up to a point, may still challenge future generations, but the maker and his intentions vanish. And though the tone sounds slightly more upbeat in Keats than in Ginsberg, yet for both poets, the young and frail Keats, who knows that he's unlikely to reach old age, the young Ginsberg, who's still unsure as to the solidity of this poetic voice and legacy, the evanescence of the maker are grounds for melancholy. Last but not least, the question of organic life versus still art, the freezing of dynamic multiplicity into a still moment, is also present in both poems. Through several interrogations, Keats tries to rekindle the cold pastoral of Stowe into the more organic life that inspired it. By contrast, Ginsberg repeatedly travels the other way, interrogating both the mysterious life pervading the forest and the power of art to deal with that organicity and life, and so pervading those notations of jungle with inserted flashbacks of scenes in New York, flashbacks in the forms of poetic stills of what, to use Ginsberg's terms, feel like codochromes of eternity, codochromes of the mind. So like the urn, these stills suggest a life that was, will immortalize the moment, but will no longer render the dynamic organicity that once animated it. So, in fact, we have the Grecian urn and the codochromes being cold pastorals, each in their own way. Besides the parallels with the Grecian urn, the first part of C.S.'s Xibalba also features more fleeting, but nonetheless no less real parallels to some of the companion odes to the urn. And here, because time is moving on, I'm going to actually skip all these beautiful slides that I had actually prepared. So I'm going to ask Chad to flick through them as I talk, just so that, you can see that I'm not hallucinating and that I have really sort of gone into some of the lines of the text. So, besides the Grecian urn, what else do we have? So, I'm going to sort of flick really until I tell you to stop. I told you I was going to say that. So, as in Ode to Psyche, for instance, in Xibalba there is also the fear of imagination and its products not being remembered if there is no perceiver or rememberer. A number of elements also seem to be taken, transformed and transposed from Ode to a Nightingale, like A, the absurdity of the human condition, B, the forms of nature that overtake the human, C, the longing to merge with a very vocal nature, but one which remains indifferent in the end to the human plight, and D, the impossibility to penetrate down to the essence of what the song or the sounds of nature actually represent. E, the lunar, semi-obscure atmosphere of the poem. Very powerful parallel there. And last but not least, there is this elusive boundary between dreaming or waking. Am I dreaming or waking, asks Keats in Ode to a Nightingale. And definitely we ask the same question in Chivalva. There is, however, an important difference. Whereas in Ode to a Nightingale and the others, it is more the Keatsian poet who watches nature. Definitely in Ginsberg's case, the poet is as much watched by the non-human other as this non-human other watches him. The loudness of nature engulfing the human perceiver is also reminiscent of the end of Ode to Autumn. Okay. Just as the very spectral presences in Ginsberg's Siesta, including the spectral presence of the power of poetry and art, bear some fragmentary parallels to the Ode on Indolence. Last but not least, Keats's injunction in Ode to Melancholy to counter the ephemerality and absurdity of the human condition by intensifying and re-intensified immersion in the particulars of nature that meet the observer's gaze. But that is actually a method practiced by Ginsberg in Siesta, though the result seems to be deeper melancholy than the hope for solace. Now, before I conclude, so I'll ask you to actually put on screen the section of Chivalva in which we hear this loudness of thought. Here we go. So, the sounds of nature are very present in Keats, and there's very aural odes, and we also have this constant noise of nature interfering for Ginsberg too. So to conclude, despite the inevitable differences in historical context, and despite the equally inevitable chasms in language and style that separate beat voices from romantic ones, of course there is a huge chasm between what we find in the program defined in lyrical ballads and what we find in the essentials of spontaneous prose.